The story begins in a small mining town in Arizona called Prosperity, which was once famous for its gold mines but now lies abandoned and forgotten. One night, a man is driving a truck loaded with toxic chemicals when a rabbit suddenly appears in the middle of the road. In an attempt to save it, he swerves the truck, causing one of the barrels of hazardous waste to fall off and roll straight into a nearby pond. The next morning, a man named Joshua arrives at that very pond to collect insects, unaware that the water has now turned poisonous. Joshua visits this place regularly because he keeps many spiders as pets and feeds them with these insects. A few days later, his friend Mike comes by to visit him as he too is interested in spiders. But when one of the spiders suddenly leaps onto the glass case, Mike jumps back in fear. That's when he notices something strange. The spiders have grown unnaturally large. Joshua proudly explains that he's been feeding them some special magical crickets, believing this discovery will one day make him rich. Just then, one of the large tarantulas escapes from its cage. Joshua starts looking for it while showing Mike his prized possession, a venomous queen spider named Canuella, who secretes a powerful acidic toxin that liquefies her prey from the inside. After Mike leaves for school, Joshua realizes that another spider has gone missing. As he searches for it, the creature suddenly crawls onto his back and bites his neck. Joshua screams in agony and in panic knocks over all the cages. The spiders are now free, swarming around the room, attacking even his pet parrot. A week later, Mike goes to visit Joshua again, but near the pond, his mother Samantha, the town sheriff, stops him. Samantha, with the help of her deputy Pete, is investigating the area, searching for the toxic barrel to send it to a lab and identify the chemical contamination. She considers the place dangerous and forces Mike to get into the truck so she can take him home. On their way back, they see a group of teenagers recklessly performing bike stunts. Samantha stops the truck, turns around, and confronts them, only to find that one of the bikers is her own daughter, Ashley. Furious, she orders Ashley into the truck and finds the mayor's son, Brett, for his careless driving. That night, Ashley spends hours on the phone, completely ignoring her brother Mike, who also wants to use it. Frustrated, Mike deliberately messes with the phone wires so Ashley thinks the line has gone dead. Then, taking advantage of the situation, he calls Joshua, but no one answers. Meanwhile, Joshua's house is now completely covered in thick spider webs. His lifeless body has become food for the monstrous spiders that have grown to the size of dogs. Elsewhere at the town mall, Mayor Wade addresses the townspeople about the worsening economic situation. He proposes building a large commercial complex to revive the local economy, but that would require him to buy out their lands. The townsfolk protest against the idea, especially Chris, the son of the late mine owner. Chris's father had died in the mines 10 years ago, but before his death, he had discovered a new vein of gold. Now, Chris has returned to town, determined not to sell his family's land. Wade and Chris get into a heated argument that soon turns physical. Chris punches the mayor in anger. Before things escalate further, Samantha intervenes and separates them. She reminds Chris that his temper has always been his worst enemy and warns him that he's been spared this time, but next time he won't be so lucky. Meanwhile, strange things start happening at Deputy Pete's house. His cat senses some kind of movement coming from inside the air vents. Actually, a spider had already slipped inside the house. The cat noticed it and went after it to catch it. At that same moment, Pete's wife was reaching for a can kept on the kitchen shelf, but while arguing with her husband, she didn't realize that a spider was hiding nearby. Suddenly, both of them heard their cat's painful cries coming from inside the air vent. Strange marks started to appear on the wall, as if the bodies of a cat and a spider had pressed against it. They followed the sound, which was now moving toward the ceiling. Just then, the lights began to flicker, and they heard the cat's final scream. Then everything went completely silent. The next morning, Chris was talking to his Aunt Gladys. He told her that years ago, he had a fight with Samantha's ex-husband, which forced him to leave town. But even after all this time, he still carried the same love in his heart for Samantha. Gladys smiled and said that if he still loved her, he should do something about it. Meanwhile, Mike tried to sneak out of the house quietly, but he saw that his mother had locked his bicycle with a handcuff. His sister, Ashley, on the other hand, was going to meet her boyfriend, Brad. Samantha handed her a taser gun and told her to be careful. At that very moment, Chris arrived with flowers to see Samantha and invited her out for dinner. Samantha smiled softly and agreed. While the two were busy talking, Mike took advantage of the moment and slipped out of the house. He walked all the way to Joshua's house, but what he saw there made his heart sink. The entire house was covered in spider webs, yet not a single spider was visible. Both Joshua and his parrot were missing. When Mike went to the back of the house, he found enormous claw marks on the ground, proving that the spiders had now grown to monstrous size. As he headed toward the mine, he came across a huge spider's leg lying on the ground. Then, in the darkness, he saw a gigantic spider inside the mine. Terrified, he turned and ran away before the creature could see him. Elsewhere, Chris was in another part of the mine with his men, planning to locate the gold vein left behind by his father. After finishing work, he was driving down the road when he saw Mike walking and offered him a ride. On the way, a frightened Mike tried to explain everything, that Joshua's spiders had grown enormous and might even start attacking humans. He even showed Chris the massive spider leg he had found, but Chris laughed it off, thinking Mike was joking and didn't believe a word of it. Meanwhile, back in the mine, one worker was still on duty. He noticed that his pipe had become clogged. When he tried to clear it by blowing air into it, hundreds of tiny spiders suddenly crawled straight into his mouth. As he struggled in agony, from the darkness emerged the poisonous spider queen, Canuvella, who attacked and killed him. That night, Mike returned home and tried to sneak in through the window, but Samantha caught him by the hand. Mike desperately tried to explain everything about Joshua, the spiders, and the terrifying signs he had seen in the mine. But Samantha thought he was just making up stories from watching too much TV. Angry and dismissive, she refused to listen. Meanwhile, strange things began happening at Mayor Wade's farm. One of his ostriches was found dead, while the others started running around wildly. Wade rushed outside and saw that only the bones of one ostrich were left. He had no idea that beneath the ground, giant spiders were lurking, waiting to strike. One by one, all the ostriches vanished into the earth as if the ground itself had swallowed them whole. The next day, the town's radio host, Haron, discussed these bizarre incidents on his show. He said that people were finding dead animals in their homes and speculated that some mysterious conspiracy might be behind it. Around the same time, Ashley went out again to watch her friend's bike race. But her boyfriend Brad stopped her in his truck and tried to kiss her. When he started getting too close, Ashley refused and told him she wasn't ready for that. Brad tried to force himself on her, and in anger, Ashley pulled out her taser gun and shocked him. Brad screamed in pain, fell out of the truck, and wet his pants in fear. Furious, he shouted that Ashley had overreacted. But without saying a word, she got into the truck and drove away. Just then, the bushes nearby rustled, and out came the enormous spiders. Seeing them, Brad screamed in terror and ran for his life. He rushed to warn his friends, but they all laughed at him because his pants were wet. Suddenly, one gigantic spider leapt forward and grabbed a boy, killing him instantly. Now everyone realized the danger was real. Panic spread everywhere as people ran in every direction. Some managed to escape on their bikes, but many were caught and devoured alive by the monstrous spiders. These gigantic creatures were so fast that they chased the bikers down, knocking them off their bikes and immediately pouncing on them, wrapping them in silk before dragging them away. The spiders pounced on them. Brad somehow accelerated his bike and delivered a powerful kick to one of the spiders during a massive jump, knocking it down. He sped across the road, but one spider chasing him got crushed under a passing truck. The remaining spiders climbed onto the same truck, distracting the driver, causing him to lose control and crash into a lamppost. The truck exploded, killing several spiders in the blast. However, the explosion also destroyed the phone lines, cutting off all communication. Brad thought he had finally defeated the spiders, but just then, even more of them emerged from the bushes. He revved up his bike again and, in panic, accidentally rode straight into the mine. His bike slammed into a wooden gate, throwing him off balance. Behind him, the spiders began digging their way through the tunnel to get in. Brad, trembling with fear, searched desperately for another exit to escape. Meanwhile, Gladys's dog began hearing strange noises coming from the basement. Curious, it went downstairs and started barking near a hole in the wall. Suddenly, a gigantic spider crawled out, grabbed the dog, and dragged it inside. A few moments later, when Gladys didn't hear her dog anymore, she went down to look for it. She found its collar lying beside the hole. When she peered inside, she realized in horror that her house was directly connected to the mine. Before she could react, several huge spiders crawled out, trapping her in their web and dragging her into the darkness. A little while later, Chris heard strange noises from beneath his own house. He went down to the basement and saw the same hole and the enormous leg of a spider. That's when he finally realized Mike had been telling the truth all along. Everything he said was real. The next morning, Chris brought that giant spider leg to Mike. Mike explained that this species of spider doesn't eat its prey immediately, which meant Gladys could still be alive. Meanwhile, Ashley was in her room, angrily tearing up photos of her boyfriend Brad. Suddenly, a huge spider crawled in through the window and slammed her hard against the wall. Hearing her terrified screams, Mike, Chris, and Samantha rushed into her room and saw the spider wrapping Ashley in its web. Chris tried to attack the spider with different things, but it trapped him in the web too. At the last second, Samantha grabbed her gun and shot the monstrous spider dead just in time. Afterward, she called Pete over the police radio, ordering him to bring every weapon he could find and come to the house immediately. Meanwhile, down in the mines, Brad was still looking for a way out. He stumbled upon a dead miner, and nearby, several people were wrapped tightly in spider silk, some still alive. In terror, Brad watched as the giant queen spider, Canuvella, devoured a living human being right in front of him. Horrified, he turned and ran for his life. Elsewhere, in a small barbershop, as two friends were closing for the night, a pair of giant spiders suddenly leapt onto one of them and began wrapping him up in their web. Back at the police station, Pete was gathering weapons and preparing to leave in his car, unaware that several enormous spiders were silently following him. When he arrived at Samantha's house, he heard something moving on the roof of his car. Without looking, he fired a shot upward, and thick green slime splattered down onto his face. Just then, everyone came out of the house and Samantha quickly shot the spider, clearing the way for everyone to jump into the car. Another spider attacked, but Chris swiftly gunned it down. Then they all piled into the police car and sped out of town. As the car raced down the road, dozens of giant spiders spotted them and began chasing after them furiously. Finally, they reached Harlan's trailer. Samantha took over his radio show and warned everyone in the area that giant spiders were roaming through the town. But no one believed her, since Harlan's show was infamous for fake alien stories. Suddenly, an enormous tarantula attacked the trailer, shaking it violently. Samantha made one final radio announcement, urging everyone to get to the mall. Its cement walls could keep them safe. The giant spider continued pounding the trailer while Pete fired at it repeatedly. Eventually, the spider collapsed and died, but the trailer was also destroyed, and the terrified screams of the people inside echoed over the radio. Moments later, another massive tarantula arrived, bringing dozens of smaller spiders with it. The group quickly jumped into the car and sped away. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, a driver was struggling to keep control of his vehicle because one spider was clinging to the roof of that car, causing it to crash. When people stepped out to see what had happened, they were horrified. Hundreds of spiders were now racing wildly through the streets. The entire town descended into chaos. People screamed and ran in all directions as the monstrous creatures shattered windows, burst into homes, and leapt across rooftops, killing anyone they could reach. Some even burrowed up from beneath the ground to launch surprise attacks. One desperate man tried to use a ladder as a bridge to get to his car, but the cunning spiders tore the car doors apart and dragged him away. When Samantha's team arrived and witnessed the terrifying destruction all around, she shouted into the police speaker, urging everyone to run toward the mall. At that moment, inside the mall, only a few workers and Wade were present. Seeing the approaching crowd, Wade smiled, assuming they had all come to see him. As people rushed into the mall, Samantha and Pete stayed behind at the entrance, firing at the incoming spiders to buy time for everyone else to get in safely. Once everyone was inside, one of the workers slammed the gate shut. Samantha and Pete sprinted in just in time and sealed the doors before the gates came crashing down. With the entrance secured, an argument broke out among the survivors about what to do next. They needed to contact the military. Wade mentioned that he had a cell phone, but the signal was too weak. So Chris and Harlan volunteered to climb up to the roof and try to use the antenna. The others split up, searching every store in the mall for weapons. Mike handed Chris a few bottles of perfume, explaining that their strong scent could confuse the spider's heightened sense of smell. Within minutes, Chris and Harlan reached the rooftop. Chris began climbing the antenna while the spiders started crawling up the building toward them. Harlan fired several shots to keep them back. Finally, Chris managed to get a signal, but when he called 911, the operator didn't believe his story. Meanwhile, another swarm of spiders began attacking the mall's front gate, slowly breaking it apart. Everyone inside waited tensely. Then Ashley noticed Wade sneaking toward the back door. She alerted the others, and one of the mall workers saw that Wade was heading toward the mine through the basement. Samantha quickly sent her children to hide there for safety, while the adults prepared to fight the giant tarantula. Moments later, the massive creature smashed through the gate, stepping aside to let thousands of smaller spiders flood into the mall. The survivors opened fire immediately, but there were far too many enemies. Overwhelmed, everyone was forced to retreat toward the basement. The mall descended into total chaos. Screams echoed everywhere as people were caught and killed in every corner. Pete couldn't reach the basement in time, so he lifted a shutter and slid underneath it. When spiders jammed their legs under the door to get through, Pete grabbed a chainsaw and hacked off every one of them, clearing the way. Down in the basement, the remaining survivors were shocked to discover that Wade had locked the next door. trapping them all inside. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, Chris and Harlan were surrounded by spiders. To distract them, Harlan bravely leapt off the roof into the bushes below. At that exact moment, Pete emerged outside, but spiders were already closing in. Since the basement door could only be opened from the inside, both Pete and Harlan had no choice but to run. Deep in the mine, Wade encountered Brad, but before they could react, the spiders found them. Wade tried to escape on Brad's bike, but a giant spider grabbed him and dragged him screaming into the darkness. Seeing this, Brad realized there was only one way to survive: to get on the bike and ride as fast as he could. Back at the mall, Barber cautiously emerged from his hiding spot, unaware that the nearby tent was shaking. Suddenly, a huge spider burst out and lunged straight at him. Meanwhile, Chris climbed higher on the antenna, grabbed onto the cables, and slid down through the vents, landing right inside the Immortal. Samantha spotted him tangled in the webbing and quickly helped him free before taking him down to the basement with the others. Suddenly, loud crashes erupted at the door, and within seconds it burst open. But to their relief, it wasn't a spider. It was Brad, using a mining machine to break through. Several spiders chased close behind him, but everyone opened fire together, killing them all. However, more spiders were still trying to break through the second door. Acting fast, Samantha rolled the machine in front of it to block the way and secure the passage. Then, leading the group, she began guiding everyone out through the tunnels. As they ran deeper into the dark mine shafts, Chris suddenly noticed a strange smell. He quickly realized it was methane gas, meaning even the slightest spark could blow up the entire mine. While moving cautiously through the darkness, one mall worker accidentally took a wrong turn, and a massive spider leapt out, grabbing and dragging him away. Moments later, another spider attacked, but the group used a crossbow to kill it silently without creating any sparks. Soon, they stumbled upon the spider's nest, a horrifying chamber where countless humans were wrapped tightly in silk, trapped, and the monstrous Spider Queen was feeding on them alive. As everyone was preparing food, something suddenly dropped from the ceiling, startling them all. But to their relief, it turned out to be Wade, completely tangled up in a web. After freeing him, Chris told Samantha to take the others and get out while he stayed behind to find Gladys. Before leaving, Chris tried to confess his true feelings to her, but Samantha smiled gently and said she already knew, and also revealed that the reason she had beaten her husband was because he had been cheating on her. They shared a brief, emotional goodbye kiss before parting ways. Meanwhile, in the basement, the giant tarantula smashed through the door and, along with a swarm of other spiders, began chasing the terrified survivors. Deep inside the mine, Chris came across several cocooned corpses, until he finally found Gladys alive, barely breathing but conscious. As they looked around, Gladys noticed something incredible. Right behind them was the gold mine, the very same one her father had discovered years ago. But before they could celebrate, the deadly Spider Queen, Consuela, appeared from the shadows. Chris couldn't risk firing his gun. Even a single spark could ignite the methane gas and blow everything up. Thinking fast, he threw the bottles of perfume he had brought earlier. The strong scent overwhelmed Consuela, confusing her senses. Seizing the moment, Chris and Gladys jumped onto Brad's bike and sped away through the tunnels. During the escape, Chris discreetly placed a box of matches inside a lamp, knowing what he was planning. As Consuela chased them relentlessly, the others outside reached the generator, only to realize it was out of gas. That's when Ashley showed her quick thinking. She pulled out her taser and used it to power the generator. The moment the lights flickered on, sparks spread across the tunnels and ignited the matches hidden in the lamp. A massive explosion erupted, setting the entire mine ablaze in a storm of fire and smoke. Chris and Gladys barely managed to escape as flames roared behind them. The explosion wiped out every last spider, including the monstrous queen, Consuela. Wade clutched his head in despair, crying that he would no longer be able to sell his precious mine. But just then, the police, firefighters, and ambulances arrived on the scene, along with Harlan and Pete. It turned out that all the rescuers had been fans of Harlan's radio show, which was why they came running after hearing his broadcast for help. When asked how many survivors were left, Chris replied that only Gladys had been found alive. A few days later, Harlan was seen smiling proudly on camera, his teeth now shining with gold, thanks to the treasure Chris had discovered in the mine. And with that gleaming grin, the film came to its end, a fiery, thrilling conclusion to a nightmarish battle against the monstrous spiders. So, how was your experience watching this thrilling, action-packed story unfold? Did the ending surprise you? Or were you expecting that explosive finale? Tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this spine-tingling adventure, don't forget to hit that like button. Let's aim for 25,000 likes to bring you more epic stories like this one. Stay tuned, because you never know what kind of horror might crawl out next. Until then, stay brave, stay curious, and keep watching the shadows.